So today I'm joined by Daniel Newberry. I think you operate in the coolest industry, if I'm honest.
The core niche that I found that I enjoyed most, which was think your government agencies that are supporting both domestic and international missions, essentially spies. I truly believe our next war will begin in space. The smartest way to do it would be just to turn off our civilian satellites. If we can't call each other and the PM can't get on the radio to tell us what's going on, everyone's just going to freak out.
How did you come up with a name?
These guys work in the shadows and I'm sitting behind a big gate, Shadowgate. And that was literally it. And then I threw partners on the end to make it sound a little bit more legit and sent it to the tax agent and said, register this.
Love it. I guess you're going to be interacting with some pretty serious people about some pretty serious things.
I'll plead the fifth as well.
Yeah.
On that. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
all right.
Yeah.
Short podcast. I can't talk about anything. So today I'm joined by Daniel Newberry, who probably has the coolest, coolest recruitment company name, and two, I think you operate in this coolest industry, if I'm honest. And I'd do a disservice if I tried to introduce what you do and how you do it. So I might just quickly hand over to you, mate, and just give us a bit of the headlines on you and your business and what you do.
So came out of internal recruiting. I was working for some of the defence primes here in Australia. Northrop Grumman is probably the world's largest defence business, running their internal talent acquisition from a sustainment perspective. Met with Blake a couple of times prior to actually making the leap of faith, and we were sort of teetering backwards and forwards on whether or not it was a good idea. I actually was going to interview with him at Vendito.
Oh, right.
To go and set up a little aerospace portfolio. And then I said, no, screw that. I want to give this a crack myself. So launched a business 2 years ago. Have sort of, fumbled our way through the defence industry, trying to figure out who's who in the zoo and I guess from an external perspective, how we were going to make it work as a very small business. Scaled over the last couple of years and had some fantastic wins and really niched in on a very sort of core group of clients within the intelligence community.
This was your original business, right? Because you started a business and then you kind of gone deeper in with a secondary business.
Yeah, correct. So we originally launched 2 years ago. That whole process was just a complete learning curve in the best way possible. We had an absolutely stellar run for 2 years. No complaints on our end. We crushed it. We had some fantastic clients. We placed people into some incredible programs, globally. I sort of put my thinking cap on towards the end of 2025 and said, I think it's time to kind of pivot this into the core niche that I found that I enjoyed most, which was the intelligence community. So think your government agencies that are supporting both domestic and international missions. Essentially spies.
Like what you see on the Born Identity, those guys in the office, right? So there's going to be things you can't talk about, I'm sure.
There definitely will be, yeah. But I'll plead the fifth when you ask me a question that I can't answer.
Yeah.
So yes, couple of years later, we sort of brainstormed as to what I was going to do and decided it was time to rebrand the business. So this, I guess, is the first time that we're talking about it publicly, but Shadowgate Partners is Shadowgate, yeah.
That's pretty cool in itself, I think.
I think it is too.
How did you come up with the name?
I was working on a project, outside of the recruitment industry, and I needed to set up a PTY Ltd really quickly.
Okay.
And I was sitting in Alice Springs with a client at the time, thinking, what could I do? Because it was still focused on the defence industry, what I was going to be doing, but servicing a different area within defence. These guys work in the shadows, and I'm sitting behind a big gate, Shadowgate. And that was literally it. And then I threw partners on the end to make it sound a little bit more legit and sent it to the tax agent and said, register this.
Love it. Okay.
So it went live, over 12 months ago now. I've had that company.
Yep.
And then it sort of towards the end of last year, I thought, no, I'm going to make that the recruitment business. That's the brand.
So when you first made the leap from being internal in that space, having an agency delivering to that space, what were some of the kind of the challenges you faced right up front? Because I guess there's a few things being in that industry, one, becoming an agency now delivering to it, but also credibility and what have you. Is that a challenge?
Credibility, definitely.
Okay.
In Australia, the defence businesses don't tend to speak to each other. They kind of are focused on their programs and their delivery, and they also are trying to compete for the same work. So, you're calling up the phone to Boeing and saying, hey, I worked at Northrop Grumman. They're going to hang up on you because they don't want to talk to you most of the time.
Okay.
We kind of figured out a way to make that our benefit in terms of our sort of key differentiator in the market to some of the other
USP,
defence agencies.
Unique selling point type thing. Yeah.
100%. So I would say that working through just the sales aspect of recruitment was hard. We were used to sort of being order takers. You'd kind of get given 40 recs and say, off you go and figure out how you're going to staff this program in, the middle of nowhere. And we had all the internal resources and capability to get that done. But going outside and trying to find the jobs was probably the hardest part. Okay. Number one, trying to get through a defense supply chain is near impossible. Procurement processes can take ages. They've got to vet your businesses. Your business almost needs to have a security clearance. We've got to have security clearance.
Oh, you have a security clearance?
I do. But
highest level, or you probably can't say?
Yeah, plead the fifth. Okay, that's my first plead the
fine.
fifth. Yeah, you actually can't talk about that. It's a part of the defense regulations that you're not allowed to speak to your level of clearance or advertise it publicly.
I guess you're going to be interacting with some pretty serious people about some pretty serious things.
I'll plead the fifth as well.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Yeah. It's going to be a short podcast. I can't talk about anything. So is it just Australia-wide? Like when you first started?
Our first client was actually a US customer. Oh. So there's a certain facility here in Australia that I worked with when I was internal. And it's a US intelligence base in the middle of Australia called Pine Gap. That's public knowledge. I think most people would be well aware that there's a random CIA station in the middle of our country. From there, we sort of tried to figure out who was operating on the base other than the business that I used to work for. So did some research online, and I started sort of being the bulldog that I am in terms of the BD style and kind of just picking up the phone to whoever I could.
I was going to say, this is fascinating. Do the numbers exist?
I was going to say, trying to find a phone number to a spy base is a little bit different than, Joe Blow that works at the cafe on the corner. So it was a lot of research. So we were out there in town in Alice Springs actually trying to shake hands with people rather than using the resources that were available to us through, licensing and all that sort of stuff, because these people don't exist online. So BDing people that don't exist is a very challenging market to be doing it in.
That is incredible.
The only way in is referral.
Okay.
So we spent a lot of capital up front flying to locations and spending a lot of time with people to help us get into the next level of the next room and ultimately worked our way to get our first client. Mm-hmm. Our first client became our biggest client as well, which was fantastic. And our first placement is now the client. So we placed the HR director out in Alice.
Textbook.
Yeah, textbook perfection, really. Yeah. So we had an opportunity to support them from a multitude of things. We worked with them on their recompete. So the US government customer was going through a recompete process, and we ended up becoming their sort of...
What's a recompete process?
So contracts have a life cycle. Mm-hmm. They came to the end of that life cycle. The government went out to tender,
right,
and essentially said all of the defence customers now need to submit their best, put their best foot forward as to who's going to do that. Yep. So we helped that customer, the incumbent, we call them, the people that are in that contract at the moment, in identifying their key personnel for the base. So we went out and scoured globally to try and find 20 of the brightest minds for their leadership positions.
Do these people exist on LinkedIn?
No.
I was going to say, how do you... I know we're going off into different tangents here, but how do you find these people, given the nature of what you're doing?
Again, it is flying around and meeting people.
Right.
We've got an internal sourcing team. So we actually set that up from day one. We wanted to make sure that we had sourcing capabilities so that, I could be focused on essentially bringing in the clients and getting to know the clients. And then I would pass a lead on to the sourcing team, who would then go and find out who the source, who that person reports to, who's in their team. And then we just work our way through people's organizational charts from that perspective. So we've essentially mapped programs end to end from a capability perspective here in Australia. Okay. And programs feed into sister programs. So there's, sister programs in the UK or in the US. So we're working, trilaterally across these different, I guess, domains.
And how long are these programs? Are we talking 5 years, longer, shorter?
One that I've just signed now is for 10 years.
Right. So you would have ongoing business in that program for 10 years?
Short answer is yes.
Yeah, okay.
It's kind of it is future-proofing, but you need to deliver. And that's the difference. I think they'd never used a staffing agency before in this location. Okay. That base has been operating for 80 years now, and they'd never had a single external person touch it.
I was going to ask, one of my next questions was, do you compete with other agencies in this space, or is there, without probably can't name names, or is it more competing with their own internal way of finding people?
There is defence recruitment agencies in this country that do very well at what they do, and they've been around for a very long time, and they're very reputable, and they've got all the people that you can think of from, you know, each I guess domain. I think our difference is that we solely focused on intelligence, and we're solely focused on anything that's space related. So
this is your newest business. This is Shadowgate.
Yes. The old business was doing that, but just without labeling that we were doing that. And then Shadowgate is kind of the you know, love child of all of the years of work that went into, I guess, setting up the presence and the, you know, establishing the client base that we were managed to do.
So I'm probably going to ask you things that you can't talk about, and again, just tell me that you can't. So intelligence and space.
Yes.
Tell me about space.
Sure.
What's going on with, like, what we can talk about?
I've never seen aliens.
No.
Although apparently someone has. Who was it that, was it not Biden? What's the other one? Obama.
Well, he said they're real, didn't he?
Yeah,
He said
yeah.
they're real.
But he's not seen them. Yeah. No, I'd love to see them if they're available to see.
They're already around, mate.
Yeah. No, I have no doubt. There's two pillars that I like to think about in space. There's commercial or civilian, as we refer to it from a defense perspective. So people that are sending payloads into space or spacecraft into space to broadcast TV or radio, or, you know, I guess, being able to talk, GPS. Without space and satellites, we wouldn't have GPS on our phones. Yeah. So those are kind of the commercial uses, and you know, realistically, all that's done in Australia is in that region. Then you've got a huge pocket within the defence industry that use space for secured communications. They use it for things that they use it for a multitude of things, and that pocket is something that is being worked on at the moment in Australia. So it's almost in its infancy stages, and I've noticed that, I guess, when working with clients, that, you know, they're trying to establish a space capability or a space program, or they're bidding or tendering for a space capability with defence. They don't have people to do it because the capabilities never existed in country. So we're sort of sent on a mission to go and find somebody overseas and bring them into country, or pluck them out of one of these facilities that have been operating for 80 years at, you know, some of the most high-tech space capability that there is globally. So space is so important. I truly believe, in everyone that I speak with, that our next war will begin in space.
Apart from this current one, right? The one after this.
Yeah.
Or has this already started in space?
No, we'll see. We'll see. Yeah. But the smartest way to do it would be just to turn off our civilian satellites. Like, if we can't call each other and the PM can't get on the radio to tell us what's going on, everyone's just going to freak out. So it'll end up in a bit of civil unrest, and then we'll see what happens from there. But
I did hear that China was launching 2,000 or some huge amount of satellites into space to out-muscle Elon Musk and Starlink. So clearly everyone's thinking about that as well. You're just nodding. Okay, we'll move on from that. Okay, so space is it an area you do quite a lot in, or is it kind of 50-50?
They directly correlate with each other. So when I say intel, there is a space element to the intel work that I do.
Okay.
I don't, and I deliberately have chosen not to work on human intelligence. So that means sending people to a weird location in Iraq, or, you know, somewhere in those locations where they're out scouting and doing spy work.
Just from a morality perspective, is that why?
I just don't want to know what the insurance costs, to be honest with you. Sending people into an active war zone.
I knew candidate why that one's not there anymore.
Yeah, morally, I have no problem with it. I think there's a place for it. But the signals intelligence is my bread and butter, and that's what I love to work on and work with. And the people in those environments are some of the brightest minds in the world, figuring out, you know, the problems.
So you talked a bit about Australia, but you talked about the UK, the US. Does your business cover things globally, or are you focused in any particular area?
Yes, so we have just stood up capability in the US. I've just placed my first team member in the US for Shadowgate, and he will be joining on launch day. So I'm not too sure when this episode's going live.
When is it going live, Serge?
Anything after the 7th of April is acceptable.
Okay.
What if, with a click of a finger, you could start your own recruitment agency? Well, now you can. With XRecruiter, launching your own agency has never been easier. In less than 3 weeks, you could be taking home 85% more of your billings with everything handled for you. You recruit, we take care of the rest. Click the link in the description, to see if you are ready to take that next step.
Yeah, so he's starting with us on the 7th of April. He actually comes out of my customer. So he's left working there and is joining my business, and essentially is going to utilize the preferred supply agreements that I've got here in Australia because they are with the US entities to go and start building the US workforce. And my intention will be to, scale Australia ever so slightly. I don't want to do it and become another Hayes or another, Manpower or any of those businesses they've got 85 recruiters sitting in the defense sector and there's only like 10 roles.
Is that right? Is that how big they are?
They're huge. They're massive. Yeah. There's plenty of work, but everyone's fighting on contingent work.
Okay.
I don't do contingent work. I never have, and I will not touch it.
Where do you specialize in terms of the type of work? Is it
retained? It's all retained.
Okay.
I've done a couple of exclusive placements, and they were with new clients that wanted to test us before, but they have only ever done contingent at 12%.
Okay.
And I just will not, don't play in that. Yeah. Have fun with, the bigger guys that can, fund that. And as a new business as well, it's just not something that I want to be, dropping my pants to.
Yeah.
Anyway, they've all come back and happily paid the retained fees after working with the other guys. So
tell me a little bit about then, obviously, amazing news going to the US, by the way. It's interesting times over there, so I'm sure that'll be fun. But tell me about maybe some of the challenges you have, because obviously a relatively new start business going into an incredibly niche area into a new country. How did you start trying to find people? And you obviously found somebody, but what was your process to try and attract people?
I actually was talking to BT about it maybe 8 months ago now, and it was, funnily enough, in line with whenever the last war kicked off. I can't actually remember what it was.
The one in Iran and America, or?
No, it was before that. Something was going on. Anyway, I just thought maybe now's a good time to sort of look at supporting capability over there, and getting some seats on some programs, doing work that we're already doing here in Australia, but not having to bring people over to Australia. So I'd say about 50% of the people that we're bringing, that we're placing, are American citizens, and we're actually relocating them from America to Australia. And then the other 50% would be the Australians supporting those programs. In America, it's a lot easier to find people. They can advertise their clearances. There's actually job boards such as Seek for just cleared professionals and cleared jobs. So it'll be very interesting to see the growth in that market from a new business perspective. I think the fact that we've already got the global PSAs is going to be quite handy, and I only work with the US stakeholders as well. So I'm up at silly o'clock in the morning having a meeting with the US, and then there's no activity happening during the day. So it's it's kind of a reverse a reverse job, if that makes sense, from a hours.
Is that why you seem tired? I'm kidding. No, you don't. I'm kidding. What about attracting people for your own business? Was that a challenge?
Yes and no. Sorry, that was the question originally.
It was, but same principles apply.
So when I was talking to BT, he actually made a comment, and I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud. He made a comment to say, just go to a rec to rec over there. And I said, I'm not paying a fucking recruitment fee.
No way. What do
and
they
then
do?
I went, whoa, hang on. Hang on a second. So no, I spent a bit of time looking in the market to try and figure out what I wanted. I prefer people with internal skill sets than I do with external staffing agency skill sets. You can teach somebody how to pick up the phone, but you can't teach somebody how to nurture these intelligence customers.
It's a very interesting perspective, because I'd say a lot of other recruitment individuals would think the opposite. If they have the BD, I can teach them the recruitment. But you're coming from such a niche perspective. It's clearly very different for your world, right?
You need to know how to speak their language, and you don't learn that language unless you've been inside the machine. So when I was speaking to people originally, I think I probably interviewed 8 people last year. I just wasn't clicking with anyone. There was a lot of, older people that were recently made redundant, for example. There's quite a lot of turnover in the US from companies just laying people off left, right and center at the moment. Even though things are booming, they're kind of automating most of their processes, i.e. recruitment flows and all that sort of stuff. But I think what's happening now is we're seeing the failure of the AI adoption in the defense industry.
Right.
Companies are air gapping their systems, so certain things aren't talking to other things, and now capabilities failing because they don't have the right people in the right roles. And I bang on about this all the time. But I was lumped with a lot of people that were made redundant, and probably not the right fit for me at the time. I parked it I then decided I was going to rebrand the business, and I was actually speaking with a client in Alice Springs about, I guess, the new business and what's coming, and all of those sorts of things. And the client made mention that her boss had recently started looking for a new job. So I just said, right, well, connect me. Her boss is essentially my customer, if that makes sense.
Yep.
The ultimate approver of the budget from a HR perspective. So I met with them, and we just clicked immediately. He's never done staffing agency before. He is absolutely scared shitless. Okay. He's getting drilled by AT on how to sell himself on the phone at the moment. It's quite hilarious. But he is really willing to give it a red hot crack, and that's what I want. Yeah. And I've gone out intentionally. I did a little stint in agency. I did 12 months in agency back in the heyday in hospitality recruiting. And I remember the commissions being so difficult to achieve from a, your what was it called, cost of seat or whatever they used to call it. You essentially got to pay for yourself times 4 or whatever it was. Yeah. So I said to him, I was like, look, I don't want to do that to you. I don't want to scare you off giving it a go, because you're ultimately going to be feeling like you're starting your own business sitting stateside, but you're working for me. So how can we kind of make this work? So I've done him a pretty good deal in terms of what he's going to come in with. And I think then the infrastructure that I've got behind me from both ex-recruiters' perspective, and then also I've managed to find payroll capability locally in America.
Excellent.
And they will do all of my payroll for temp subcontracting in America as well. So, until XR get themselves established from a subcontracting perspective, I've managed to outsource all of that.
So do you think the US will be your biggest?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It already is.
Yeah,
I mean, I've in Australia, I think I've done 5 deals in 2 years. Everything else has come from the US.
Right.
It's paid in US dollars it's all US.
I guess next question, and we're in a state in the world right now where it's a lot of uncertainty. That will have a knock-on effect to potentially the average recruiter's life if things are not going that well in the world. Is that a good market for you to exist in, where there is a war going on, or?
Well, I hope so.
Yeah, I was going to say, because is that a good thing, or is that a consolidation?
I don't think. Well, look,
not a good thing.
And nobody wants war. The capability that we support operates 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, no matter if there's a war or not.
Okay.
So I'm not in weapons manufacturing. Okay. I'm not in, deployable missions. I'm in the people that are monitoring to make sure that nothing's going on. Okay. Bread and butter intelligence. Yeah. And the contracts are there regardless of what's going on.
So you're kind of resistant to the volatility of that thing. Okay. Yeah. Because I was curious, because I know that I've seen a few of your posts on LinkedIn, and I think one was about missiles or radars or something kind of cool. And I was thinking, do you need to have a deep understanding of that side of things to have the conversations?
You almost need to be an engineer within these systems to actually be able to intelligently get into a room with these guys. And the Americans don't hold back their thought on what you're saying to them. They will be brutally honest with you if you've said the wrong thing. So you kind of need to go into those conversations knowing what you know, and if you don't, you need to take a subject matter expert in with you to do the talking. And that's what I've done. Is I've always lent on the SMEs in those aspects. I learned a lot though working at Northrop Grumman. I will forever cherish my time in that business. It taught me so much, and I took that information and then kind of plugged it into what I'm doing now, and just expanded my knowledge base in this specific industry sector.
So let's rewind a little bit, because I want to touch on the fact that you started a business and you're a bit wider spread than you are now, as in specialization. So what I'm curious about is what did you learn in that time that you think if someone was to start an agency now that they could take away and use? Like what from your journey do you think is worth sharing?
I think picking a niche is so important. Yeah. And I'm guilty of it. I still want to do other things, but I know that it's the wrong thing to do. People don't go to generalists. If they're going to spend the money, they want somebody that knows what they're doing and they've got the genuine networks in the industry that they're going to be working in. If I could have had our time again 2 years ago, I absolutely would have niched in. But we didn't know what we didn't know. Yeah. So, we had the luxury of fumbling through that process and securing enough work to build the business, make a profit, and do all of the good things that we did. And now the niching in of Shadowgate is going to be, I guess, the evolution of the decision that's been made ultimately.
What does the future look like for you, and what problems or obstacles do you kind of see that you might face?
The future's looking bright in the best way possible. Australia is expanding its capability at the moment and pouring more money than they ever have into what it is that we do. In that as well, our relationship with the US is coming leaps and bounds. As I mentioned, I've set up shop in the US, but I'm trading under a US incorporation. So I've actually set up Shadowgate Partners Inc., so a C corporation over there. So we have now the capability to really work with the US rather than being a offshore subsidiary that wants to subcontract in. We can actually get federal grants and federal programs and go in on that. And the person that I brought in, he holds a top secret clearance. So
are you allowed to say that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you can in the US. You can't here in Australia.
Yeah.
But he can have the same conversations that I can have because he's got the appropriate clearance over there. So, I just see this being a really positive time for Shadowgate. I see it being a positive time for the traction that's been made over the last 2 years. And then the rebrand, I think, is going to prick the ears of those who have been watching, knowing that we've been doing that work, but kind of waiting for probably something similar to this to occur. Just the last 4 weeks, I've signed some of the biggest defense companies globally to support the missions here in Australia.
That's incredible. And I'm curious because going international so quickly is by default essential for your business. Would it be something you'd recommend to a normal inverted commas recruiter going where the work is, or would you just kind of stay in your area?
I've seen a lot of people come and go. Those that have stayed have not done things to risk ruining their businesses. They've not scaled too quickly. If they've scaled, they've done it because they're niched right in and they know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly who their market is. And my hat's off to those guys that are just absolutely crushing it because it's hard. Like it's really hard doing this, by yourself. I think if you're going to do it, it needs to make sense. I would not have done it if I didn't have a contract to go and do it with. So I've won a contract that allowed me to set this up. I've then leveraged that contract to then hire this person.
Had you done that when you first started your first company, or did you kind of go in a bit, okay, let's just make this work? Because I'm curious, because it's a big leap for anybody to go from being an employee to starting on their own.
I had no contracts, if that's what you're asking.
Yes.
Took us 6 months to find our first one. So I think BT and the team were a little bit concerned that we weren't making any money. And then when they saw our first placement and it was the biggest one in ex-recruiters history, they went, oh, okay, we get it.
Yeah,
we get it. Yeah, we get it. And then it just flowed. Like we did the work that mattered to us, and we did the work with the clients that were respectful of what we had on offer. And we always held firm. Yeah. Lots of people are used to lots of recruiters contacting them all the time and dropping their pants to get the business. Yeah, we'll do it at 12% contingent. We've stayed at 18% retained. Yeah. We've held firm there. We will not drop from that. That was in the old business. The new business, we will not pivot from that strategy.
Look at what you do and how you have to recruit. This is a
costly process. It is full headhunting. Yeah.
There is a premium attached to that level of service because there is so much work that goes into that.
So we've never posted a job ad in over 2 years of trading. We've only ever headhunted. And those headhunting exercises, when you've got physical people doing them for you, they're expensive. So a process to run like ours is probably 10 times than posting a Seek ad and sitting there waiting for the applicants to come in. It just doesn't work. The value that we need to give to these people is because they've done it themselves. They're sitting on a rec for 6 months and they need somebody in that mission doing that thing tomorrow.
I love the fact you call them missions.
Well, that's what it is. We deploy them out to sites to work with the US government.
Any advice for somebody who's thinking about making the move, knows there's something beyond, but hasn't quite got the courage?
I've had a few conversations with, I think whenever the onboarding team or the sales team get an internal person, they do palm them to me to have a conversation with people that are looking at joining the ex-recruiter community and setting up their own business. My advice to them is, what's the worst that's going to happen? You have to go and get another job. You're in one now, who cares?
Yeah.
What have you got to lose?
Yeah.
As long as you can pay your bills for the first 6 months, you're going to be fine.
Yeah.
So knuckle down for another 12 months and save. Make sure you've got, the backing in place from your family and just do it.
Because you're in such a niche, difficult, challenging market, we don't often see people take that long to get there because they're in a very mainstream market. You know, the jobs everywhere. You can advertise. You can do all these things. So often we see it happening a lot quicker, to be honest. But it's just that fear factor. So I want to talk a little bit about, you know, you take a lot of time to find the clients, find the prospects, physically being there. Once you've kind of got them in a room, or you kind of start the relationship, how do you work on that relationship? Because it's a very unique relationship you have. It's not a transactional, I'll find you somebody where we go. This sounds like something that you've got to kind of nurture. How do you work with that?
It's a really good question, and it's part of my trade secret. So I'll answer the question a little bit gilded, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Once we're in the room with somebody and we go through our process in detail of how we can actually support them, and the examples of the programs that we're currently supporting and the way in which we've solved their problems, generally 9 times out of 10, it's an easy win for us from that perspective. What I would say is that most businesses that pick up work in this space, if there is many out there, they get the work and then they don't deliver on the work. So we follow through, and that's something that I'm really proud of. We have never not placed a role that we've been given, ever. And in our 2 and a bit years of trading, I've had one person leave within probation, and it was because of a family reason. It was not because of failing probation. So we've got a high hit rate as well. And that just comes down to, I think, the cement process that we've put in place that is locked down and is essentially bulletproof from the outset. And I think clients like to hear that we operate like an internal team from a screening perspective, from a vetting perspective. We check clearances. We do everything that you would do normally internally before a client even gets a copy of their professional summaries. Our process is multi-staged before we release anybody's information to a client. And we've done that deliberately to make sure that we're not doing what other businesses do and throwing CVs at a wall and seeing what sticks and hoping that they get a placement out of it. Because you move somebody and their family to, you know, these remote locations, you need them to stay there. Otherwise, it's going to be a big upset for everyone. You know, they've got kids in school that they're moving to, you know, crazy towns around the world. It needs to make sense for everyone. So there's quite a journey that you've got to take both the clients and the candidates on, you know, to build trust. Just doing the work is how you keep them around and how you keep them nurtured. Winning the business, the hardest part is getting the introduction to them.
From a candidate perspective, is it a case of like and again, I'm from a very normal type recruitment world where, you know, your shortlist is 3 or 4 people. Is that the same numbers for you? Or are you talking one? Okay.
Yeah. Funnily enough, our very first client for our very first role, she flew out from Virginia to meet us. And that was when we won that recompete work that I mentioned earlier. So essentially we're sitting with her at dinner, and we're used to having to present 3 or 4 CVs to a hiring manager internally, you know, let us know which ones you'd like to interview. She said to us immediately at that dinner, she said, look, I know you guys know who we preferred just when you submitted those CVs. In future, only send us one. None of us have time to be looking at more than one CV.
Love it.
But you need to be sure that we're going to say yes to that person. So don't shoot egg on your face and have to go and restart the whole process again. So we took that from day one. We said, right, well, we knew who they were going to hire. We just knew we will only present the best of the people that we find. 8 times out of 10, there really is only one person that can, you know, with that skill set that can actually do the job, that has the right clearance, that's willing to move to X. So it's not a hard number to achieve. But when there is multiple, we really do, you know, I'll have minimum of 2 interviews with them myself before they leave my business. That's before the sourcing team have done 2 themselves. So it's a stringent process. And by the end of that, I'll know who the client's going to like.
You headhunt someone, you tell them about this opportunity, you pull them out, you convince them there's an opportunity there, and then they're number 2. How do you manage that candidate? You're suddenly going to have to tell them that you didn't even submit them.
No, I tell them before, even during interview sometimes I say, look, this isn't it for you. One thing that I saw from my colleagues being internal was that they were never getting back to candidates. And you know what it's like when you sat through an interview process and nobody gives you a call just to say, hey, it's not going to proceed, or even an email.
Yeah.
You know? It takes 2 seconds to send an email. You just need to cut and paste from
Closure,
a draft.
Right?
Yeah. Because the process is so stringent, by the end of it, we really know these people. We know their families. We know, I could tell you where they went to primary school because I've done so much vetting on these people. So we work with them on finding them another opportunity. And that's when we go into reverse marketing these people into different opportunities around the country. And that is how we reverse market. It's a very long-winded process, but we will work with those people to essentially identify, say, 20 businesses around the country that need their skill set with their clearance and in locations that they're willing to work. We will then find the hiring managers in those companies and essentially get on the phone and sell this person one by one, 20 times down the list until we find them a job. We never just discard somebody, if that makes sense. We'll repurpose them to where it makes sense for them to be homed.
And I want to ask this question. I'm unsure if you're even going to be able to give me any kind of an answer, but what's the coolest job you've recruited or the coolest experience you've had?
So I got given some position descriptions, actually. They just landed in my inbox from the US client a US client that we work with quite frequently. And they were for a very specific program, and the role titles, when I looked at them, I just went, whoa, I don't know if I should be looking at this. And then when I read through the position description, I just went, oh, okay. I had no idea that occurs, but okay, got it.
I'm fascinated.
Yeah. It was one of those like out of body experiences where you're like, wow, these people must really trust me to be sending me, this information. And we got sent on a bit of a manhunt. So they needed, I think it was 8 positions, and they were all different things. So there was people working in innovation labs, and there was people working, on operations floors, and there was, engineers that had certain sets of skills with missile detection and, things that you just don't see every day. They're certainly not advertised on Seek. And then you've got to try and find these people living in the US or somewhere else at another base that are, willing to come and plonk themselves in Central Australia. So that was probably one of the more fun ones that I've had the chance to do. And we're still waiting to find out whether or not those people are going through. They're just waiting on an award from the US government at the moment.
Amazing. So if there's any recruiters out there, what is one thing that you think anyone listening, any recruiter out there who's just embarking on their career, they should be taking away from your journey and this episode?
Be really specific on what you want to do. Make sure it makes sense for your life and your situation at the time that you're making the decision. As I said, I've seen a lot of people come and go, and you want to be one that stays around, because if you can stick it out, it's very, very rewarding for you, your family and your friends.
Did you always know you wanted to work in this kind of space?
Defense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, mate, it's been a pleasure having you. Honestly, I really want to ask you more, and I know I'm not going to get any more answers, so I think we can kind of wrap it up. But you're in a fascinating space. You're doing an incredible job. I think the stories I hear about you in general are really, really positive. So, mate, keep going. It's
Thanks,
an amazing
mate.
world. And when you do finish this all up, tell me all the secrets, because I'm keen to know.
Yeah, no, not going to happen.
Okay.